Check out Muggsy Bogues and
watching
Larry
TV?
Johnson at the High Blast.
He just disrupts everything.
Bogues makes the steal from deep.
No guys running around in between your legs. He just plays with so much heart and hustle.
He'll always be most known as the shortest player to ever play in the league, a title which likely will never be taken from him. And he does get some credit for being a 14-year NBA pro at just 5'3". But there was a reason he was in the league for as long as he was. He was one of the best distributors of his era, with his rocket passes always finding the open man. But his incredible quickness and speed allowed for him to get penetration often and attack the defense before they got set. So while they were reacting to him, he was finding an open man. And even if you sagged off him in the half court, he could still get by you, as he was just that quick. And then there was his defense, as there wasn't a single player in the league who looked forward to playing Muggsy Bogues, no matter how short he was, as he was glued to you for 48 minutes. And you always had to keep your head on a swivel, because he could come from anywhere to strip you. But you weren't going to strip him, with Bogues being one of the best ever at taking care of the ball. He became a legend in high school as the leader of the Dunbar Poets, before defying the odds as one of the best point guards in a competitive ACC. Then he built his legend as a fan favorite and franchise standout for the Charlotte Hornets, where he spent the majority of his career. A career which saw him set multiple Hornets records and finish with one of the best assist-to-turnover ratios in league history. And Muggsy Bogues was a great point guard for being 5'3", but you don't even need that second part, as he was just a great point guard, regardless of his height. Let's jog your memory. A Baltimore native, Tyrone Bogues would get his nickname on the local courts, where the older brother of his friend Daryl Wood would give him the nickname of Muggsy, due to his resemblance to the character of the same name in the TV show Bowery Boys. And along with Daryl, Bogues would team up with another friend named Reggie Williams, as the three would play pickup whenever they could, as well as play with the Lafayette Recreation Center. And there was one team who would always give the trio a challenge, which was the Cecil Kirk Recreation Center, who featured two players named Reggie Lewis and David Wingate. But when high school rolled around, these rivals would become teammates at Dunbar High, where their names have become legend, as together they made up what many consider to be the best high school basketball teams of all time in the early 80s, the Dunbar Poets. But it was almost without Muggsy, as he originally attended Southern High School. But as a teenager who aspired to be a dental technician, Bogues transferred to Dunbar, as they offered healthcare classes. By the time Bogues joined the team as a junior, the Poets were beginning to garner some national attention. And they weren't just winning, they were embarrassing every single team they played, as coach Bob Wade did a masterful job of managing all the talent he had. Dunbar would have a memorable matchup with a Camden team who many thought were the #1 team, led by Billy Thompson. And in the game, Bogues would finish with 15 points, 12 assists, and 6 steals, and the Poets would win by 25, which would be close to the amount of victories they accumulated this year, as they finished the season 29-0 and secured a Baltimore City championship. However, the media gave the mythical national championship to Calvert Hall, a team that, despite some efforts to set up a game, Dunbar did not play this season. But come the 82-83 season, Wingate had moved on to Georgetown, and would eventually be a second-round pick in the 86 NBA draft, and would go on to enjoy a 15-year NBA career. So you'd think Dunbar might take a step back, but the 83 team is the first team that comes to mind when talking about the Poets. Dunbar still possessed plenty of NBA talent, such as Bogues, Williams, and Lewis. And just to get an idea of how good this team was, Wade had Lewis coming off the bench. Once again, the Dunbar team was must-see basketball, taking on the best teams high school hoops had to offer and dominating each and every one of them. They would begin the season as the top-ranked team in the nation and went on to beat teams by an average victory margin of about 37 points, even against formidable opponents like DeMatha Catholic and Flint Hill. And for the second straight year, they went undefeated, finishing with a 31-0 record and a Baltimore City championship. And this time, the media would crown them the mythical 1983 national champions. So Bogues had come in and established himself as the leader of the best high school team many had ever seen, and was given offers by many schools. But he always wanted a challenge, so he chose Wake Forest, who played in the competitive ACC, as he would be a Demon Deacon for the next 4 years. It would definitely be a challenge for a freshman Bogues to earn his playing time, as he was on a veteran Wake Forest team who had won at least 20 games in each of the past 3 seasons, and featured other future NBA players such as forward Kenny Green and the upperclassmen backcourt of Danny Young and Delaney Rudd. But Bogues found his role, giving the team about 10 minutes per game off the bench while appearing in all 32 games. And while he may not have put up big numbers, he constantly pushed the pace and hounded his man on defense whenever he was out there. And Wake Forest continued as one of the nation's best teams, finishing with a 20-7 regular season record as the 17th ranked team in the nation. They would defeat Virginia in the conference tourney before falling to Maryland in the semis, but they still found themselves with a berth in the NCAA tourney. They would defeat Kansas in round 2, with Bogues dishing 2 assists in 11 minutes of action. The Sweet 16 would be an impressive defeat of top-seeded DePaul, as Bogues got 6 minutes and recorded a steal. But their year came to an end in the Elite 8, losing by 5 points to Houston, as Bogues saw just 2 minutes of action, with his freshman season wrapping up with him averaging about 1 point, 1.5 assists, and a steal per game. The Deacons had lost Danny Young and big man Anthony Tichy to graduation, and they really felt these losses. But the 5'3" Bogues had become a D1 starter as a sophomore, and impressed many with his trademark relentless play and overall poise in leading the team. Although he would score less than 7 points a game, he still made 50% of his shots. But as a passer, he was the best on the team and in the conference, as he led the ACC in assists. And on defense, he was a thief, leading the conference in steals at nearly 3 per game, which would even be a top 5 mark in the nation. The team looked good about halfway through the season, sitting at 11-4 after a 7-game win streak, which included a huge overtime win versus number 2 Duke. But they won just 3 more games the rest of the way to finish the regular season at 14-12. And after falling to UNC in the first round of the conference tourney, they would not get a tournament berth. However, they would receive an NIT invite, but this was over quickly after losing their first game to USF, as Bogues' sophomore season ended with him averaging about 6.5 points, 7 assists, and 3 steals per game. 1986 would be another step back for Wake Forest, due to the retirement of longtime head coach Carl Tacey, as he was replaced with Bob Stack. And with Delaney Rudd and Kenny Green both heading to the NBA, Wake Forest's offense plummeted, but Bogues continued to up his stock. The junior would improve to a top 3 scorer on the team and would again lead the conference in assists and steals per game, as well as finish as a top 10 pickpocket in the nation, and this year he would move into the nation's top 3 for best distributors. Bogues played and started every game and rarely came off the floor, as he would average 38 minutes per game, and they needed him for every last one of those minutes, as the Demon Deacons did not have much depth, and although they would start with a respectable 5-6 record, they would then lose 9 straight, and overall 14 of their final 16, to finish with a regular season record of 7-20, as they would surpass the 70-point mark just 4 times this season. Their conference tournament came to an end in the quarterfinals after a loss to Duke, and with an 8-21 record, they weren't going to be getting any postseason invites. So Bogues' season ended with him averaging about 11.5 points, 8.5 assists, and 3 steals per game. But over the summer, Bogues would show the world that he was as real as it gets. The FIBA World Championships occurred in Spain over the summer of '86, and there were likely a lot of countries who were confused when they saw the pint-sized Bogues take the court in a Team USA warm-up. But Bogues had earned his spot on the national team and proved himself early and often, making his name known in the international basketball scene, as he would play in all 10 of Team USA's games while leading the team in both assists and steals, en route to helping the US to a gold medal finish. Bogues was back at Wake Forest as the team leader for his senior year and put together a phenomenal season, but luckily he had some help in the form of a great freshman year from Sam Ivey. But Bogues was the main attraction, as this season he would lead the team in scoring on 50% shooting, while again playing nearly every minute, as he would average an ACC leading 39 minutes per game. Unsurprisingly, he again led the conference in assists and steals, and his career-high 9.5 assists per game would be a top 5 mark in the nation. But perhaps most impressive was that for the 4th straight season, he improved his rebounding, as he was averaging nearly 4 per game as the smallest player on the court by far. Wake Forest came out of the gate strong with 5 straight wins, but this would be the high point of the season, as they would find themselves trending toward a 500 record as the season went on. But Bogues was also showing up in the big games, scoring a season-high 23 points in an overtime loss to a ranked Clemson team, and then falling to a number 2 ranked Duke team by just 2 points in overtime during conference play, as Bogues finished with a team-high 17 points. But by the end of the regular season, Wake Forest had just a 13-14 record, and although they would defeat Clemson in the ACC tourney quarterfinals behind 21 points from Bogues, they would get bounced by NC State the following day and would again miss out on postseason play, as Bogues' season ended with him averaging about 15 points, 4 rebounds, 9.5 assists, and 2.5 steals per game. So his college career was over, leaving Wake Forest as their career leader in steals and assists. And while a 5'3" player seems like a long shot to ever reach the NBA, Bogues was a different breed, and it didn't hurt that he had a 44-inch vertical leap. And while the NBA still wasn't a certainty, a basketball career after college was, when he was taken second overall by the USBL's Rhode Island Gulls in April, where he would average 22 points and 8.5 assists while leading the league in minutes before an ankle injury ended his season. But then the NBA draft came along in late June, and Bogues found himself in the green room.
The Washington Bullets select Tyrone Bogues. Wake Forest.
8 picks after Reggie Williams and 10 picks before Reggie Lewis, Bogues was selected 12th overall by the Washington Bullets. And a big reason for this was due to his USBL career. Bullets general manager John Ferry had been scouting a Sudanese big man playing for the Gulls a couple years prior named Manute Bol, and in doing so was very impressed by Bol's much smaller teammate Spud Webb. But Ferry was determined to get Bol and passed on Webb in the '85 draft. But after seeing the success Webb was having with the Atlanta Hawks, Ferry wondered if Bogues could reach similar heights. And it was a done deal after his son Danny, who was playing for Duke at the time, told his dad that his Blue Devils team would meticulously prep for Muggsy when they played Wake Forest. So Bogues was set to begin the 1988 season on an NBA roster. Bogues joined a veteran Bullets team featuring guys like Moses Malone and Bernard King. And even though Washington used a first-round pick for Bogues, you couldn't help but wonder if it was a way to market the team, with the Bullets now featuring the shortest and the tallest player in NBA history. But Bogues quickly showed that he was no novelty act. Bogues was in the starting lineup for the season opener versus Atlanta and would score 10 points while leading the team with 6 assists and 4 steals. And while he would lose his starting spot after 12 games, he still remained an important part of the rotation, receiving about 22.5 minutes per game and averaging 6 assists and over a steal and a half. But with the Bullets sitting at 8-19, head coach Kevin Loughery was fired and replaced with Wes Unseld. And the hiring of Unseld would be detrimental to Bogues' rookie season, as with Unseld at the helm, Bogues saw his minutes drop throughout the year, yet he would still make the most of his minutes as a great passer and defender for Washington. But his biggest weakness this year was to be expected from someone his size, and that was getting his shots to fall over the bigger defenders, as he would shoot below 40% this season. But passing was still his strong suit, as he had 9 games with double-digit assists and 2 double-doubles, with his best performance of the season coming in a January 30th loss to Cleveland, when he had a season-high 16 points and 12 assists. The Bullets would finish with a 38-44 record and get a first-round matchup with Detroit. But at this point, Bogues was buried on the bench, as he received just 2 minutes of playing time in the Bullets' 5-game series loss, with his rookie season seeing him average about 5 points, 5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. So Unseld didn't seem to have any use for Bogues. And with the league welcoming 2 new teams the following season, the Bullets left him unprotected in the expansion draft. The 1989 season saw the Miami Heat and Charlotte Hornets enter the league, and the latter had selected Bogues, who despite seeing his role decrease last season, had still led the Bullets in assists and steals. So the production was there. And on top of Bogues, the Hornets also drafted sharpshooter Dell Curry, traded for Kelly Tripucka, and selected Rex Chapman in the rookie draft. And there was a lot of fan support for Charlotte's new team. The Hornets were coached by Dick Harder, and it looked like he was another coach who didn't really believe in Bogues' ability to legitimately run an offense, as he opted to use Bogues as more of a spark plug off the bench to start the year. But near the end of the season, with the Hornets sitting at 15-46, Harder made Bogues a starter, and he would dish 10 assists in his first game and follow that up with a 10-point, 14-assist double-double. As after recording double-digit assists in just 10 of his first 61 games, Bogues recorded at least 10 assists in 15 of his final 21 games as a starter, which included 5 double-doubles and his career high of 19 assists in the final game of the season versus Boston, as he would average over 12 assists during this period, and overall this season, he would again lead his team in assists and steals. However, with Bogues as a starter, the Hornets only won 5 more games, to finish with the East's worst record at 20-62, as year 2 had seen Bogues average about 5.5 points, 8 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. 1990 saw the Hornets bolster their front court by drafting J.R. Reed and then trading for Armin Gilliam early in the season. Bogues' end to last season had gotten him the starting nod to begin this season, and he was doing an improved version of his usual work, as with opportunity, he was now one of the best assist men and pickpockets in the entire league. And what was most encouraging to see is that he was making 50% of his shots, so it was hard to argue that he wasn't a legit starting point guard in the NBA. But with the Hornets sitting at 4-20, Harder decided to completely shift his lineup around, which resulted in Rex Chapman taking over point guard duties and Bogues coming off the bench. However, Bogues would still get good minutes, and while his shooting efficiency suffered, his assist numbers only went up in his bench role. But over the next 16 games, Charlotte only won 4 more times, before Harder was given his release and replaced with Gene Littles. And Littles would immediately put Bogues back in the starting lineup, where he would remain for the rest of the season. And this proved to be a great decision, as Bogues would average a double-double over his final 41 games, along with 2 steals, as he shot an incredible 51.8% from the field over the second half of the season. And when it was all said and done, Bogues had averaged a career-high 10.7 assists per game this year, which was a top 5 mark in the NBA, as not only did he lead the Hornets in that category, but he also led them with 2 steals per game. And for the season, he had more steals than he had turnovers. But the Hornets didn't do a lot of winning with or without Bogues as a starter, as they would finish with just a 19-63 record, with Bogues' season seeing him average about 9.5 points, 10.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. The Hornets added swingman Kendall Gill through the draft, but it was starting to look like no matter what Bogues did, he would just never be a full-time starter, as even though he started the first 46 games of the season and was again putting up efficient point guard numbers, after a 14-32 start, he was back to coming off the bench and getting 7 less minutes per game, as Littles opted to go with a much bigger lineup, cycling between Chapman, Gill, and Curry as his backcourt starters, while having Bogues come off the bench to jumpstart the second unit. However, even though Bogues' numbers dropped, over the course of the entire season, he was still extremely effective, recording 30 games with at least 10 assists and 14 double-doubles, and would once again lead the Hornets in assists and steals. Yet Charlotte just couldn't find the winning formula, as over their final 36 games, they would win just 12 more times, to finish at 26-56. However, it was a step in the right direction, and Bogues' season had ended with him averaging about 7 points, 8.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. But the Hornets got the first pick in the 91 draft, so it looked like their fortunes were beginning to change. Charlotte selected UNLV big man Larry Johnson, and now you looked at the team completely differently, as they featured the lightning quick, never gets tired Bogues, along with Kendall Gill, who played college ball with a team nicknamed the Flying Illini, and Johnson, who played with a UNLV team known as the Runnin' Rebels. So the logical thing to do in 1992 could be summed up in one word: run. And with Alan Bristow taking over as head coach, that's exactly what the Hornets would do, as they played at the league's second fastest pace this season and scored the 6th most points in the league. And Bogues would turn in his first and only season playing all 82 games, and would start a then career high 69 of them, as he once again would lead the team in assists and steals, with his career high 2.1 steals per game being a top 10 mark in the league, and his assist totals being good for a top 5 finish in the NBA. And allowing Bogues to push the ball in the open court before the defense could get set led to a lot of transition buckets, and in turn led to him shooting a then career high 47.2% from the field. This season would see him rack up 38 games with double-figure scoring and 33 games with at least 10 assists, including 15 double-doubles. And he would have 7 games with at least 5 steals. Bogues started just 1 of the team's first 11 games, and in that time the Hornets went 2-9. But after that, he was a full-time starter. And although the Hornets still didn't make the playoffs, it was their 3rd consecutive season of improvement, finishing with a 31-51 record, with Bogues' year seeing him average about 9 points, 9 assists, and 2 steals per game. But the Hornets had another high draft pick in 92, and for the 2nd straight season, they hit a home run. With the 2nd pick, the Hornets selected Alonzo Mourning, giving them one of the league's best young front courts, and overall a complete team. And finally, after years of proving himself, Bogues was the team's full-time starter from opening night to the season finale, and would turn in the greatest season of his career up to that point, averaging double figures for the first time in his 6 seasons, while still shooting over 45% from the field. And even though Bogues was doing his best scoring on the league's second highest scoring team, he was also facilitating a lot of his teammates' scoring, once again leading the team and finishing top 5 in the league in assists, while also again leading the team in steals. This year would see Bogues hit double figures in 43 games and record 35 games with at least 10 assists, and an incredible 20 double-doubles, as Bogues was the perfect example of heart over height, leading one of the league's up-and-coming teams to their best season in franchise history. They were fighting for one of the final playoff spots for most of the season, but as the year was winding down, the Hornets were turning it up, winning 9 of their final 12, including ending the season on a 5-game winning streak, as their 44-38 record would get them the 5 seed and a first-round matchup with a Reggie Lewis-led Celtics team. The Celtics would take Game 1 with Bogues dishing a postseason career-high 15 assists, but Bogues was likely more worried about his friend than the loss, as this was the game that saw Lewis collapse on the court and ultimately pass away just a few months later. But without Lewis for the remainder of the series, the Hornets took advantage, as over the next 2 games, Bogues averaged 11.5 points on nearly 58% shooting, as the Hornets took a 2-1 lead. Then after a 6-point and 9-assist performance from Bogues in Game 4, Alonzo Mourning would hit the memorable shot that pushed Charlotte into the second round. The first 2 games versus New York saw Bogues average a solid 8.5 points and 7.5 assists, while really being a pest on defense, as he racked up 7 combined steals. Yet Charlotte was down 0-2. Bogues would play incredible in Game 3, finishing with 16 points, 8 assists, and 5 steals, while coming up big in the clutch. The game had gone to overtime, and the Knicks had the ball with seconds left, and the score tied at 102. But Bogues would strip John Starks to force double OT. Then in the second overtime, he would prevent an Anthony Mason breakaway bucket, and later would hit the go-ahead shot in the final minute to give the Hornets the win. Unfortunately, this would be the Hornets' last win of the series, as New York wrapped it up in 5, with Bogues' season ending with him averaging about 10 points, 9 assists, and 2 steals per game. But the 94 season would see Bogues truly reach the individual peak of his NBA career. The Hornets looked like a team on the rise, and were expecting to turn in their first ever 50-win season in 94, but instead, they would often be without one of their 2 stars, as Johnson would miss 31 games, and Mourning would miss 20. The team had moved on from Gill and replaced him with Hersey Hawkins, but other than that looked quite similar from the year before, again being led by Bogues in what would be a career year. He would improve on last season, averaging a then career high 10.8 points per game, while also dishing 10.1 assists per game, which would be second to only John Stockton, as these two were the only players to average double-digit assists in 94, marking the only season of Bogues' career averaging a double-double. And while he also averaged a career high in turnovers, he was only giving it up 2.2 times per game, as this would be the only season of his career averaging at least 2 turnovers. He was scoring as good as he ever had, racking up double figures in 47 games, including 5 games with at least 20, and his career high of 24 points on nearly 82% shooting, along with 10 assists in a February 7th loss to Philly, as this would also mark one of his 43 games with at least 10 assists, and one of his career-high 29 double-doubles. And while he had to try and make up for the scoring lost with the absences of Mourning and Johnson, he also took on some of the rebounding load, as at just 5'3", he averaged a career-high 4.1 rebounds per game, and would even have an 18-point, 10-rebound performance in a March 25th defeat of Detroit. Unfortunately, with their top players missing so much time, the Hornets weren't able to match last year's win total, finishing with a 41-41 record and missing the playoffs, as Bogues' career year had seen him average about 11 points, 10 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. The 95 Hornets performed a little bit more like people were expecting for the 94 team, mainly because Mourning and Johnson had much healthier years. And with these two getting a lot of the defensive attention, Bogues was able to turn in the greatest scoring season of his career, averaging a career-high 11.1 points per game on a then career-high 47.7% shooting. And while he wasn't averaging a double-double, he would still be a top 5 passer in the league for the 4th consecutive season and 5th time in 6 years. Bogues would hit double figures in 48 games, including 4 with at least 20, and he was still getting his teammates involved, recording 33 games with at least 10 assists and 23 double-doubles. But the Hornets were taking a different approach this year, as they really slowed down their pace and went from a run you out of the gym offensive team to wearing down teams with their defense, allowing the 6th lowest scoring average in the league. They would string together 2 win streaks of at least 6 games over their first 46 games, as they were sitting at 30-16. And then even though they went just 20-16 the rest of the way, they would still capture that first 50-win season, as they finished with a 50-32 record and got a first-round matchup with the Chicago Bulls. Bogues did his best against the tough Bulls defense, but they played him well, as although he had 10 assists in Game 1, he managed just 6 points on 2 of 10 shooting. He came back in Game 2 with his best performance, going for 13 points and 7 assists, while shooting over 45% from the field, as Charlotte evened the series. He would have 11 points in Game 3, but would dish just 3 assists as the Bulls won. And then in Game 4, he managed just 4 points on 2 of 12 shooting, as Chicago wrapped it up, with Bogues' season seeing him average about 11 points, 8.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. But over the past 8 seasons, Bogues had rarely been slowed down on the court, yet this offseason would leave him operating at a lower speed for the remainder of his career. Bogues had been bothered by a sore knee over the course of the season, so in August he underwent arthroscopic surgery, with the original prognosis being that he would be good to go for the season opener. But the new year rolled around and Bogues still hadn't made his season debut, as it wasn't until mid-February that he finally returned to the court, for a team who no longer featured Alonzo Mourning, as they had traded him to Miami before the season for Glen Rice. Bogues racked up 7 assists in each of his first 2 games back, but by his 4th game, the soreness returned, and he would again be sidelined for another 2 weeks. He would return to the lineup in early March, but this time lasted just 2 games, before again being shut down due to his knee, never playing again this season for a Hornets team who finished with a 41-41 record and missed the playoffs, as Bogues' 6 games saw him average about 2.5 points, 1 rebound, and 3 assists per game. But 1997 would be much better for Bogues and historic for Charlotte.
That I'm trying to disobey my mama?
I didn't say that. You did, Muggsy.
That I love my mama.
But before getting to that, near the beginning of the season, Bogues would find his way onto the big screen, as he had played a role in the 1996 film Space Jam, starring Michael Jordan, as Bogues had been one of the 5 players who had gotten his basketball powers stolen by the Monstars. But back to the real games. The Hornets had shipped away an unhappy Larry Johnson in the offseason and received Anthony Mason in return, while also acquiring center Vlade Divac in a draft day trade, and bringing in a new coach in Dave Cowens. So the team looked much different. Bogues was able to play and start in 65 games, but his body couldn't handle the minutes it once could, as after averaging nearly 35 minutes per game from the 92 season through the 95 season, he would get less than 29 minutes this year. And although his numbers dropped from before his knee surgery, he was still the team leader in assists and tied for the team lead in steals. And on offense, he would even match his career high, with 24 points in a December 17th defeat of Philly, while also racking up 19 games with at least 10 assists. Bogues would also give the first and last glimpse of a new weapon, as he decided to take advantage of what was the last year of a shortened 3-point line, due to not feeling completely comfortable on his knee, as after attempting 163 3-pointers over his first 9 seasons, he attempted 144 in this season alone, and made nearly 42% of them. But this would be an outlier, as he would never attempt more than 51 in any season after this. Yet, as the season wore on, Bogues would get more comfortable with his knee, and the new-look Hornets would get more comfortable with each other, as they pulled off a 9-game winning streak near the end of the year and finished with a franchise record 54 wins, leading to a first-round playoff matchup with New York. Bogues would give the Hornets an efficient 13 points in a Game 1 loss before sitting out Game 2 after re-aggravating a hamstring injury. He was back for Game 3 and dropped a postseason career-high 19 points on nearly 54% shooting. But a deep and experienced Knicks team was too much, as they pulled off the sweep, with Bogues' season seeing him average about 8 points, 7 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. So it was clear the Hornets were heading in the right direction, but they wouldn't take Bogues with them. Although Bogues had played in 65 games last year, a lot of times he would be a game-time decision, and Cowens didn't like that unpredictability that Bogues was bringing to his lineup. So during the offseason, they brought in a younger guard in David Wesley. But what was more hurtful to Bogues is that shortly before this, Cowens suggested that Bogues should consider retirement after an MRI revealed significant damage to his knee, which made the Wesley signing all the more obvious as someone to replace Bogues. And when Bogues was struggling to get playing time during the preseason, he would ask for a trade. And even though Hornets owner George Shinn assured him that he would retire as a Hornet, after they requested more MRIs, the bridge was broken, and Bogues wanted out. So after playing about 16 total minutes over the Hornets' first 5 games, Bogues was traded to the Golden State Warriors, leaving Charlotte as one of the most efficient passers the league has ever seen. Bogues' best years were behind him, but it was more about him showing he can still play and leaving the game when he wanted to, not when coaches decided he was no longer effective. Bogues joined a Warriors team who were fielding one of the league's worst rosters after the Latrell Sprewell suspension. Bogues began the season as a backup point guard, yet was still managing nearly 5 assists in less than 20 minutes a night across his first 28 games. But after the team traded Brian Shaw, Bogues became a starter for the remainder of the season, and over his final 31 games, he averaged over 32.5 minutes and upped his numbers across the board, as by season's end, he would be the Warriors' assist leader. But the Warriors had limped to a 19-63 finish, as Bogues' season had seen him average about 5.5 points, 5.5 assists, and a steal per game. The Warriors selected rookie Antoine Jamison going into the lockout-shortened 99 season, and while they weren't going to be contending, Bogues was still able to provide a young team with the leadership that he had become so known for. Unfortunately, he would have a lot of trouble staying on the court this year, as the 50-game season would see him appear in just 36 of those. However, he would shoot a career-high 49.4% from the field. He would struggle with knee and hamstring issues, as well as chickenpox. So when he did play, he came off the bench and put up modest numbers for a Warriors team who finished at 21-29 and missed the playoffs, as Bogues' year ended with him averaging about 5 points, 3.5 assists, and a steal per game. But now Bogues was a free agent, and he had full freedom to decide where he wanted to go. Bogues would sign with Toronto for the 2000 season. The Raptors featured a high-potential young duo of Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady, and had been surrounding them with veterans, with one of those veterans being Bogues' longtime Charlotte teammate, Dell Curry. Bogues had a much healthier season in 2000, appearing in 80 games for the team in a backup role, and having some throwback performances, like a 10-point, 11-assist double-double in just the 4th game of the season in a win over his former team in the Hornets. Then in late March, he would tie his career high with 24 points, as he made all 6 of his shots, including going 4 for 4 from deep, in a win over Boston. And for the first time in the Raptors' young franchise history, they were winning, as they would finish with a 47-35 record and get a first-round matchup with New York. Bogues would see the court in every game, while even starting 2 of them, and tying for the team lead in steals. But the Knicks' experience was too much, as they swept Toronto, with Bogues' year seeing him average about 5 points, 3.5 assists, and a steal per game. In the offseason, Bogues would re-sign with Toronto on a multi-year deal. He would play the season opener, but wouldn't play again before undergoing arthroscopic surgery for his other knee in early November, which was expected to keep him out for at least a month. His return wouldn't come until late January, as he would play 2 games for the team, which would be his final games, as on February 22nd, he was included in a trade to New York, as more of a salary dump. However, he would never play a game for the team, and his 2001 season had seen him average 1 rebound, 1.5 assists, and half a steal per game. Over the offseason, Bogues was included in a deal which saw him end up in Dallas, but his mother had been battling cancer and had taken a turn for the worst, so he left the team to be with her, which led to the Mavericks waiving him. But Mavs owner Mark Cuban would honor the $3.6 million Bogues had left on his deal, allowing him to care for his mother without worry, as this marked the end of Bogues' NBA career. After his playing career, Bogues would try his hand in coaching in both a professional and amateur capacity, and would eventually become an ambassador for the Charlotte Hornets. Muggsy Bogues will likely always hold the distinction of being the shortest player in NBA history, and something like that will leave you forever immortalized. But it needs to be highlighted that he was so much more than that title, as he was a legit starting caliber point guard for over a decade and one of the most efficient passers in league history. He played to his advantages and didn't let anyone dictate how he played. A leader from his earliest days at Dunbar, Bogues proved that height didn't matter through a stellar 4-year career at Wake Forest. And then when there was still question marks around a player his size being effective at the next level, he quieted all of those. And while it took time for coaches to fully believe in his ability to lead an NBA offense, when he got a full opportunity, he wasn't going to give anyone a chance to change their mind. And while his career teetered off near the end, it was not due to him declining as a player, it was due to the rapid decline of his body. And even with nagging injuries, he still kept himself productive for every team he played on. And it can't be reiterated enough that Muggsy Bogues was so much more than a novelty act. and there was a reason the Monstars took his powers. But that's it for today's episode on Muggsy Bogues. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on one of his Dunbar teammates, or this one on the second shortest player in NBA history. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.